This time I'm bringing you my bottom line review on the DVD The Gladstone Technique by Morris Arnie Lang from Hudson Music. Let's check it out. Morris Arnie Lang is a percussionist who traveled the world for 40 years working with the New York Philharmonic. He not only worked with the most famous classical conductors on the planet, but had the opportunity to appear on hundreds of records and on TV. As an educator, he has written various books, has chaired several college percussion departments, and is currently professor of percussion at Lehman College in New York City. He's a member of the PAS Hall of Fame. Arnie is also one of the few surviving students of Billy Gladstone, hence the title of his latest DVD on the Hudson Music label, The Gladstone Technique. And because I myself have been promoting the Gladstone Technique for many years, having incorporated the basic mechanics of the technique into my own tension-free drumming concepts after learning them from Joe Morello, who I consider to have been the world's foremost leading expert on the Gladstone system, I was extremely interested to learn Arnie's take on this technique. In the first section, Arnie explains that he studied on and off with Gladstone for a period of about 3 years, but Gladstone never actually wrote down any of his lessons. So, Arnie begins with an overview of what he considers to be 5 main basic principles of the Gladstone system. Although he includes some good information in this first section, he also discusses some things that I feel would confuse anyone attempting to learn the basics of the Gladstone system. For example, Arnie states, "You don't relax when you play, you get tenser," which might be misinterpreted by many. He also says that the Gladstone system isn't a finger technique, and although he is technically correct because Gladstone incorporated arms, wrists, and fingers, he also used finger isolation, which is a technique that uses only fingers. Gladstone used this for top-end speed, and as Joe Morello used to say when he taught it, Billy likened it to the fine, polished finish on a piece of furniture. In part 2 of the DVD, Arnie covers body posture and form, and he teaches the basic Gladstone stroke, which he divides into 3 parts: a lift, downstroke, and rebound. He also offers good information here when he says to follow the rebound and don't pull off the drum. In part 3, traditional grip, Arnie teaches the basic stroke for those using both matched grip and traditional grip. In part 4, hand position, Arnie opens by saying there's no such thing as incorrect hand position, and goes on to explain that you use different positions based on the musical situation you are in. He also warns, try not to do anything that you hurt yourself. Part 5, mechanics of the stroke. Arnie explains that when he first started studying with Gladstone, he was already playing in an orchestra and he was a scholarship student at Juilliard, but for the first 6 months, all Gladstone had Arnie practice was the basic stroke, and in this section, Arnie goes over that stroke in great detail. In part 6, doubles and other concepts, Arnie covers the playing of double strokes and goes into rolls and other grace note rudiments. He also discusses subdividing note groups as a way to keep better time when playing slower tempos. In part 7, accents, Arnie explains that his accents come from pushing the stick down faster. The speed of it gives it more force. He explains, it's leverage, it's not a matter of force. In part 8, drum set technique, Arnie doesn't play the kit himself, but he critiques his 2 on DVD students as they play the drum set. In part 9, the Gladstone drum, Arnie discusses what made the original Gladstone-built snare drum so incredible, which is why an original can bring up to $30,000 today. Arnie also explains how he began producing replicas of the snare drum himself. In part 10, conclusion and career discussion, Arnie discusses his longtime association with the New York Philharmonic, what it's like to play in an orchestra, and his experiences in many other musical fields. As I said at the start of this review, I originally learned the Gladstone technique from Joe Morello, and I have been a proponent of this system for over 30 years. I use the mechanics of the Gladstone technique as the core of my own tension-free drumming concepts, and my students have had great success learning to play with maximum speed, power, endurance, and control, but without the tension that can cause all sorts of serious repetitive motion injuries, which are unfortunately all too common among drummers today. I also wrote the first article ever to detail the Gladstone system in 1979 for Modern Drummer magazine. As a matter of fact, when I first met Shelly Mann, he said he recognized my name from that article, and he informed me that he was a longtime student of Gladstone's, which I hadn't known. He He also wondered how I knew so much about the technique, never having studied directly with Gladstone myself. I explained that the credit was all due to Joe Morello. That said, my bottom line opinion of Artie's DVD is that it makes a good introduction to the Gladstone technique for those who are not familiar with it. Arnie does a good job of covering the basic principles and the main stroke, which we call the free stroke, but he leaves out many of the more advanced Gladstone techniques such as arms, wrist and finger combinations, and finger isolation. For that reason, I would suggest that those who are already familiar with the basics of Gladstone seek out more advanced instruction.